It's that time. It's day 18 of reading every single day for the rest of my life. Today we got Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday. Um, I'm on page 54 right now. And yeah, let's get this started, man. Let's run it. All right. 30 minutes starting now, as you can see. Here we go. Okay. Slow down to go faster. Octavian was just 8 years old when he was named Julius Caesar's heir. At 19, at the Forum to Rome's elite were motioning to his adoptive father's statue he wore he would match him to accomplish for accomplishment. This was a young man going places in a hurry, as the expression goes. And yet, he did not become the famed Augustus or the vulnerable by moving quickly. Not like you'd think, anyway. His rise from pretender to the throne was, in fact, a remarkable, methodical, and patient one, advised as he was by two great Stoic teachers, Athenodorus and Arius Didymus. He spent 10 years sharing power with Mark Antony. He spent nearly 5 years as Princeps Senatus, leader of the Senate. Then finally, in 27 BC, he declared himself Augustus Caesar. A dazzling rise that, unlike most of his predecessors and successors, actually stuck, because it was in accordance with his favorite saying, festina lente, that is, to make haste slowly. As we learn from the historian Suetonius, he thought nothing less becoming in a well-trained leader than haste and rashness. Suetonius wrote, and accordingly favorite sayings of his were, more haste, less speed. Better a safe commander than a bold, and that is done quickly which is done well enough. Yes, it's important to hustle. We can't tarry or delay or develop a case of slows. Yet we must run with our swiftness. At the same time, our path also requires disciplined pacing. The person who rushes, the person who puts efficiency over efficacy, who ignores the small stuff, is, in the end, not very efficient. When Octavian took over Rome, it was a city of bricks. He was proud, he said, to leave it a grand empire of marble. It took time, it took getting a lot of small things right, but it was worth it. It's easy to go fast. It is not always best. They like to say in the military that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Do it right and it goes quickly. Try to go too quickly and it won't go right. How do you balance hustle with festina lente? Perhaps it's best embodied in a different Civil War general, General George Thomas. Thomas was hardly known for his speed. His nickname was Old Slow Trot, which he has earned from the discipline he enforced as a cavalry commander. But it really wasn't that he was slow, he was deliberate. He wouldn't be knocked off his block, nor would he be deterred from his cause. That's how he earned his other nickname, the Rock of Chickamauga. For standing fast against a massive enemy attack that would have easily broken a fair-weather general like George McClellan, Thomas found himself at odds with Grant for not moving fast enough against General Hood's army at Nashville. Taking such an exasperatingly long time to get moving on Grant's order to attack at once, that Grant moved to personally relieve him. Yet this was unfair to Thomas, and precisely why it is too simple to say that one must hustle anyways, always. Grant thought that Thomas wasn't hurrying, that he was dragging his feet. In fact, he was fully committed, moving slowly only because he was first getting everything right, having prepared properly, supplied adequately, trained effectively, and waited for the right moment, and then attacked with all deliberate speed. Thomas annihilated his enemy at the Battle of Nashville, one of the great victories of the war in December 1864. Old Slow Trot was a rock, one that, once it got rolling, nothing could block. That's festina lente. Energy plus moderation, measured exertion, eagerness with control. Slowly, the poet Juan Ramon Gemez would say, You do everything correctly, You do everything correctly. That's true with leadership as well as lifting weights, running as well as writing. Hustle isn't always about hurrying. It is about getting things done properly. It's okay to move slowly, provided that you never stop. Do we not understand that in the story of the tortoise and the hare that it was actually the turtle who hustled? The hare was Manny Machado of George McClellan. Brilliant, fast even in bursts, but not consistently so. Doing things badly, Jimenez would say to critics or editors or even impatient leaders, does not give you the right to demand haste from the person who does them well. And so we must have this attitude not only toward our people, our boss, the audience, the suppliers who want us to rush, but also the part of ourselves that loves doing. That we just wanted to get started before we were ready. The part of us that loves the fight, that loves the action, that wants to get straight to the work. Of course, having the impulse is better than not having it, but if it is not properly managed, it will turn from an asset to a liability. Practice, then practice more. It's said that the master swordsman Nakayama Hakuda would practice drawing his sword some 2,000 times a day. At the Hayashiksuka Temple, in one marathon of endurance training, he was recorded drawing his sword 10,000 times in a single 24-hour period. We can imagine the sheer speed required to do this, and also the deliberateness to do many reps in so little time. But why would he do such a thing at all? Because as Octavian's teacher, Arrius Didymus said, practice over a long time turns into a second nature. We don't rise to the occasion, we fall to the level of our training. The samurai Musashi was once challenged by a warrior named Mayak Gunbei, a man who thought himself one of the best in the world. On his third attack, frustrated by his lack of success, Gunbei charged at Musashi at an aggressive lunge. Musashi, having prepared for this exact scenario countless times, replied, "That is not what you do," then paired the blow with one sword and watched as the man gashed his own cheek against Musashi's other sword. How had he known? Practice. Shoten Seki ran with Mushi's phrase, training from morning to night. Oh, and you've done that? Okay, do it more. And after that, more. 1,000 days of training to develop. Musashi would write 10,000 days of training to polish. For a samurai, there was no such thing as pretty good. If a pretty good swordsman met a better fighter, he would die. It's like the Basketball Hall of Famer Bill Bradley's observation. When you are not practicing, refining, working, somewhere, someone else is. And when you meet them, they will beat you or kill you. Gunbei was lucky enough to learn this lesson and live to tell about it. In fact, after Musashi treated the man's wound, Gunbei accepted that he was outmatched and became Musashi's student, training and practicing under him until he was no longer prone to the mistakes that come from such rashness. Look, this is not a drill. There is no greatness without practice. Lots of practice. Repetitive practice. Exhausting, bone-crunching, soul-crushing practice. And yet, what emerges from this practice is the opposite of three feelings. Energy, strength, confidence. You deserve that. Yes, your body will burn, but that's the evidence. From that burning comes real heat. Heat you can apply to your craft, to your work, to your body. The cellist Pablo Casals practiced continually late into his life, even long after he was widely considered a master, because he believed he was making progress. In fact, we might say that progress and practice are synonyms. You can't have the former without the latter, and the latter is worthless without the former. Drawing the sword from the scabbard, thrusting, blocking, to build up your stamina for those skills, you lift weights, you do conditioning. To put it together, you spar. It's the same with music. You can jam with other talented musicians, you can pull all those sessions together to learn new things, but before all that, as Castle said, you can simply practice your scales into your bedroom for hours upon hours. What are those scales for you? You better know, and you better be doing them. No matter what you do, practice will make you better. Florence Nightingale wanted young nurses to understand that nursing was an art that required as hard as preparation as any painter or sculptor work. Churchill spent many evenings practicing his impromptu performances. Only Only you know what it will look like to train in your art like a samurai, an Olympic athlete, a master in pursuit of excellence. Only you will know what you need to practice from morning until night, what to repeat 10,000 times. It won't be easy, but in the burden of also freedom and confidence, the pleasure of the flow state, the rhythm of second nature, the quiet calmness of knowing that from practice you'll know exactly what to do when it counts, the pride and the dependability of doing it too. Just work. It is said that no profile of the writer Joyce Carol Oates can begin with mentioning how many books she's published. But this has been true since at least the 70s, and she has not stopped publishing. Her first book, with Shuddering Fall, was released in 1964. By the 1980s, she was up to 19 books. By the 90s, 27. In the first decade of the 20s, she released 10 more books. In the following decade, 11 more, and dang. In that time, she also published nearly a dozen more novels under pseudonyms. 45 short story collections, 12 poetry collections, 11 novels, 9 plays, 6 young adult novels, and 4 children's books, even into her 80s. She is still working. How many words must that be in total? 15 million? 20 million? But that's what the greats do. They don't just show up. They do more than practice. They do the work. Her peers, often more famous and male, attended fancy parties. They had scandalous affairs. They cultivated their literary personas. They despaired over writer's block. They nursed addictions. Joyce Carol Oates worked and taught and worked. She published. I came from a part of the world where work did... Sorry, my eyes, hold on. Take these glasses out, just for a bit. Joyce Carol Oates worked and taught and worked. She published. I come from a part of the world where people did work rather than just talk about it, she said. And so if you feel that you just can't write, or you're too tired, or this, that, and the other, just stop thinking about it and go and work. Which is why Oates has done nearly every day thus far of her 58-year career, grinding down pencils and pens as she wrote her first drafts longhand, wearing through typewriters and then laptops as she published her manuscripts. In ancient Greece, there was not only a word to describe this kind of ceaseless work ethic. There's a word to describe this kind of ceaseless work ethic. Philoponia. There were even awards for it. Is this love of toil, of the process, that defined someone like Louis Gehrig? It was the reporter Dan Daniel who asked Gehrig in 1933 whether he had any idea of how many games he'd play in a row. Gehrig guessed several hundred, in fact. It was already more than the double that. The same is likely true for Oates. If asked how many books she'd written, she'd probably undercount. That isn't how she thinks. She thinks about the work. El Trabajo Gustoso is one writer put it, the pleasurable work, not what has come out the other side. I have always lived a very conventional life of moderation, she explained. Absolutely regular hours, nothing exotic, no need even to organize my time. We reach a 24-hour day, which is more than enough to do what we must do. It's true. Today, we're more apt to talk about work than lose ourselves in it. We like to make a big show of its social media. We spend a lot of money acquiring the right tools or setting up a fancy office. Getting down to it every day? That sounds like torture. Sometimes it is torture. Sometimes it is torture. I butchered that so bad. Getting down to it every day? That sounds like torture. Sometimes it is torture. There are days when the words don't come easy. There are days when the vulnerability makes you ache. There are days when, especially in Oates' case, since the writes longhand, that your fingers ache and your eyes blur, that she wouldn't have it the other way. If you do it right, it's also torture not to do it. The sled dog gets anxious if it doesn't get to wear its harness. The horse wants to go out for a trot. The bee dies if it cuts off its beehive. When you find out what you meant to do, you do it. The dancer Martha Graham would have tell a story about her vaudeville days, and then she followed by a bird act. When the music went on, the white cockatoos, trained for years, reinforcement and ritual, would become most hysterical with excitement, clawing and beating at the cage until it was time for them to go on stage and perform. Birds, damn it, birds, she would yell at students who didn't give their full commitment. The birds can't want more than you can. Some ask, what if the reward for all this labor, they are in the correct if they think it's reward and fame in weeks on the bestseller list. Others want a guarantee. If I put my 10,000 hours in, then I'll get the job, then I'll be able to go pro, then I'll be rich. No, that's not how this goes. Always and forever, the reward is the work. It is a joy itself. It is torture and also heaven. Sweaty, wonderful salvation. And that's how you manage to do prodigious amounts of it, not grudgingly, but lovingly. I'm not conscious of working, especially of hard working at all, Oates said. Writing and teaching have always been for me so richly rewarding that I don't think of them as work in the usual sense of the word. We don't get anywhere in this life without work, but we can get somewhere magical when we do the things of work that doesn't even feel like work. When we follow the excitement that gets us into the harness, that gets us out in the fields, when we follow the urge to get moving and get at it, decide who you want to be. The Stoics command us, and then do that work. Will you be recognized for it? Maybe, but that will be extra. Dress for success. Angela Merkel grew up in East Germany before the fall of communism. Basic luxuries were not available. Informers made it clear that it was best not to stand out for anything, especially for how one dressed. In 1990, she entered politics, emerging from behind the Berlin Wall in an insular world of academia, where she had worked for many years as a quantum chemist. Suddenly, all sorts of attention was paid to how she looked. Much of Merkel's surprise, one was political advisor attempted to encourage her to improve her style. Merkel was mortified. In Eastern Bloc countries, one simply did not do such things. Yet a politician must do such things, especially as the doable standard dictates a female politician. A reporter once inquired why Merkel was so often seen at the same pantsuit. Don't you have anything else? I am a civil servant, Merkel replied, not a model. Yet she was also very savvy enough to refer to politics as a show, and she has decided to put on an unusual one. She dressed plainly. She ignores trendy or expensive designers. She favors comfortable shoes. She kept her boxy haircut. She showed up at the office or on television most days, just as God made her, no makeup, ready to work. It's a simple look, but always professional, always proper. There is a joke that both critics and fans of Merkel like to tell. What does Merkel do with her old clothes? She wears them. People notice her appearance, so she used to make it a statement about modesty and authenticity. Some people get caught up in the game. Some people think it is beneath them. Merkel just figured out how to play it in her own sober and authentic way. The Stoics rejected the idea, popularized by the Cynics, that the philosopher had to reject the standards and fashions of society. While the Cynics went around in rags, the Stoics dressed like normal people. It was whether that what was on the inside was different that mattered. Still, they abstained from needless luxury or silly fades. Gaius Masunius Rufus said that one ought to use clothing and shoes in exactly the same way as armor. That is for the protection of the body and not for display. Therefore, just as the most powerful weapon and those best calculated to project the bears are the best, and not those which attract the eye by their sheen. So likewise, the garment of shoe which is most useful for the body is best, and not one which causes the foolish to turn and stare. A leader must sweat the small stuff, but also must know what stuff matters only to small people. How can we dress and style ourselves is one of those tricky edge cases that make temperance difficult to pinpoint. Sorry, I'm tired. A person who is sloppy and slovenly can hardly be said to be particularly self-disciplined. I'm going to restart that. A person who is sloppy and slovenly can hardly be said to be particularly self-disciplined. But on the other hand, those who value the superficial, sharp creases, brand names, or the fanciest new styles, over the substantive, or equally off track. Maybe that's why Steve Jobs picked out one of the comfortable sweater and a brand of jeans and stuck with them all of his life. They weren't cheap. They fit well. They work in every situation. They were timelessly in style. And then he never thought about them again. General Zachary Taylor hated wearing a uniform and disliked displaying his rank or honors, which were considerable. Yet when he met his commando David Connor on the Rio Grande during the Mexican-American War, Taylor dressed up to make his guests more comfortable, as full was more expected for naval officers. Meanwhile, Commando Connor, on the gesture of respect to his peers' humble lifestyle, came in civilian dress, all of which is to say that every situation, every person may require a different approach. Most of the time, we're not in the field. Sometimes we're at the job interview or appearing on camera or meeting someone important. Just because we don't push much stock into superficial things doesn't mean that other people's impressions don't matter, especially if we're trying to accomplish something or convince someone of something. Presentation counts, and so do other people's feelings. It's not everything, but you ignore it at your peril. And there can be something about cleaning up, a nice shave, freshly ironed garments that put us in the right headspace too. Just as cleaning up your desk can work wonders for productivity and focus. This is why Joe McCarthy, the manager of Garrick's Yankees, banned shaving in the locker room. Not because he wanted unshaved athletes, or the contrary, he demanded they show up shaven and ready to work. No body does their best in the bathrobe, which is why we ought to take a shower and get ready in the morning. Even if you were not going to leave the house, shine your shoes until you are the one glowing. Ooh, I like that. Shine your shoes until you are the one glowing. While the world is unpredictable, one thing we do control is how we take care of ourselves. Making our bed, tucking our shirt, running a comb through our hair, these little things we can always do. Practice that instill order and cleanness in a messy situation. POWs and Holocaust survivors have spoken out about how they try to find ways to keep clean and maintain little parts of their appearance, even amid the filth and horror of their circumstances. No one would accuse them of vanity for doing this. Instead, we understand it as courageous assertion of the dignity their captors desire to steal from them. Sweat the small stuff, but don't be superficial. Welcome to temperance. It's a balance of opposites, by definition. Sometimes we have to be a bit of Commando Connor, and sometimes we have to be General Taylor. We have to pull off what Angela Merkel has figured out: how to play the game of appearances without being distracted or consumed by appearance. We dress well, but not too well. We take care and take care of ourselves, but never at the neglect of people or things in our care. We take our appearance seriously without taking ourselves seriously. As they say in fashion circles, we wear the suit. The suit doesn't wear us. We look sharp to stay sharp, to be sharp, because we are sharp. Seek discomfort. Seneca was a rich man. He inherited estates from his father. He invested well across the Roman Empire. He accumulated even greater wealth in the emperor's service. Yet every so often, for a few days, he would eat only the scantant fare and wear his coarsest clothing. He would actively seek out discomfort, mimicking abject poverty and harsher life conditions. He slept on the ground and deprived himself of everything but bread and water. Now you might think that this is just precious, even condescending hobby for privileged people, like ice baths or camping, but it was a lot more than that. First off, Seneca took plans to make sure the struggle was serious. The palate must be a real one, he wrote to a friend advising him to try this voluntary discomfort. And the same applies to your mock, and your bread must be hard and grimy. Endure all this for 3 or 4 days at a time, sometimes more. so it is genuine trial and not amusement. The point was not bragging rights or moral purity. Seneca knew that the vast majority of his fellow citizens lived quietly and without complaint in exactly the circumstances he was voluntarily experiencing. In fact, this was the point. He wanted to make it clear for himself that was perfectly possible and normal to endure. By getting up and close and personal with what so many of his wealthy friends dreaded, what made them risk averse and anxious, Seneca could say to himself, "Is this what you feared?" More than once, this practice came in handy for Seneca indeed. Eventually, it saved his life. As Nero went insane, Seneca made his move to leave, casually offering the entirety of his fortune for his freedom. Nero was shocked. Was shocked. Who could give it all up? Who could value honor more than money? Incensed, Nero would later attempt to poison Seneca at the country retreat, but was unsuccessful. We're told because of the man's meager diet of berries and water made it impossible. But most of us spend our lives building up walls between us and anything unpleasant, not understanding how dependent this makes us. The whole point of success, we feel, is to never have to struggle, to have not only what we need, but everything we want and demand: hot water, nice clothes, food, all food of the finest ingredients, cooked by the best restaurants, delivered to our door in minutes. At the slightest pang of hunger, this is perfectly fine to enjoy in moderation. Why shouldn't life generally be comfortable? Still, we must understand that the modern world is conspiring against us, working to degrade our ability to endure even the slightest difficulty. It spoils us and sets us up for failure or slavery. We take the easy way because it's there. Who would possibly choose to be cold? What's the point of being hot if you can turn on the AC? Why would you needlessly carry heavy things you can get someone to pick up for you? Who walks around when they could drive? Oh, God. We take the easy way. A person who understands the value of discipline. A person who is comfortable being comfortable. Go run a marathon. Sleep on the ground. Lift something heavy. Do the manual labor yourself. Jump in the cold lake. Success breeds softness. It also breeds fear. We become addicted to our creative creature comforts, and then we become afraid of losing them. Seneca was no Cato to this day, but we knew from his practice that he could be if he had one. Had to. By seeking out discomfort, we toughen ourselves up. We're not going to live an utterly Spartan existence day to day. Then we better at least practice toughness regularly enough that we are not afraid of it. It was his early days as a simple law student and that sent Gandhi up for his later challenges. Let me read that. It was his early days as a simple law student that set Gandhi up for his later challenges. He got used to getting by on a little, being hungry or cold. Later, when they threw him in jail like Reuben Carter, he was ready. There was nothing they could take from him that he had not practiced going without. All self-discipline begins with the body, but it doesn't just magically happen. It was a skill Socrates cultivated, a muscle he built, through the challenges he sought. Just as Buddha spent countless nights sleeping outdoors and wearing rough robes, this treatment is how you temper a sword, exposing it, for briefly instances, to heat and cold, to environments that attack the steel and harden it. And so the best of us become the best by undergoing the same challenges, by forcing our bodies to change and adapt. The fact of the matter is that someday life will have serious discomfort in store for us. Are we going to dread that, or just be ready? We train ourselves in denial as a form of self-preservation. Take the cold bath bravely. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote to his daughter, "Make yourself do unpleasant things so as to gain the upper hand for your soul." The person who has the upper hand of their soul, the person who can go without, the person who does not fear change or discomfort or a reversal of fortune. This person is harder to kill and harder to defeat. They are also happier, more well-balanced, and in better shape. We must practice temperance now, in times of plenty, because none of us know what the future holds. Only that plenty never lasts. Manage the load. It cost Greg Popovich $250,000, but it got him to 2 more division titles in his 5th championship. It also changed the NBA and all of sports. In 2012, the San Antonio Spurs were coming off a 6-game road trip. It was their 4th game in 5 nights, just 24 hours before their victory over the Orlando Magic and 72 hours after a double overtime victory over the Raptors. 1,700 miles away from Toronto, it was a compressed 66 games scheduled with more back-to-back games than ever before. More than that, in the previous season, 2 of Popovich's stars, Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, had gone straight from the playoffs to the Olympics, where they started for their respective national teams. Tim Duncan, perhaps the best power forward to ever play, was in his 16th year in the league. 30 minutes is up. I'm going to finish this page. Collectively, they had upward of 3,000 professional games among them, and consistently went deep into the playoffs. As part of the Spurs dynasty, which was built around the workhorse role playing and sustained excellence. Fascinating. Yeah, that was day 18. I'll see you guys on day 19. We're approaching a month, and we're going to hammer down every single day. We're never going to stop. We're never stopping. Here we go. Yeah. See you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.